strength of the web is something like 10 times stronger than steel. If you were actually to produce such a product in relative terms to our, what do you call it, manufacturing, it would be 10 times more stronger than steel. So they want to capture that. So they want to know, how does that spider, which is just a little crawly, creepy crawly thing, produce such an incredible, powerful product? And it is coming out of his inside. So they want to find out, where is it coming from? You see? They want to understand. But we can understand that the cobweb of the spider is the Shakti of the spider. It's his Shakti. It's his power. So we have power. He has power. We can't make a cobweb. He can make a cobweb. So in one sense, the spider has his unique individual power or energy, Shakti. So similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all power, the reservoir of all energy. And therefore, through his separated energy, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, these elements, they are my separated energy, and they are coming through his various expansions, just like Krishna's business. Krishna's only business is to enjoy. He has no business with the material energy. But for the purpose of creating wonderful facilities for the living entity to imitate God, or to try to be God, therefore he creates these subtle and gross arrangements. So the internal subtle senses are experienced as having four aspects in the shape of mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. So this is the beginning manifestation of false ego. False ego is manifested in contaminated consciousness. Everyone has contaminated consciousness. Therefore we can understand that because our consciousness is contaminated, therefore all sorts of lusty affairs are going on in our mind. This is very easy to understand, that we're naturally contaminated. Everyone's contaminated. That's why if I want to enjoy, I have to be very careful how I enjoy, even in a material sense. Forget about the spiritual morality. Even in the material, just for the sheer functioning of society, there has to be rules and regulations by which I indulge in my lusty affairs. If I suddenly decide that every woman is for me, I can get in a lot of trouble. So therefore, there is what we call regulating control. We see in society there's regulating laws. You shall not steal, you should not covet thy neighbor's wife, or I see there's one, you shouldn't covet thy neighbor's donkey, or something like that. But there's all sorts of rules that you shouldn't be you shouldn't be taking away your neighbor's things, basically. So we have all this morality. We have so many rules and regulations because we have contamination. What is that contamination? Krishna said it is lust alone, O Arjuna, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So within the heart there is lusty affair. And everyone knows when a person is lusty, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. Just like if you came down for Prasadam time and someone started eating everyone's plate of food, you would start to beat the fellow. Because it's an uncontrollable lust. So we see that this lust is manifested through contaminated consciousness in the form of false ego. False ego is the manifestation of what is called avidya. Avidya means contaminated knowledge. You see, consciousness and knowledge cannot be separated. You cannot separate consciousness from knowledge. So knowledge is contaminated by association. Prabhupada one time was given a very good example. He said, just like ice. Ice is by nature liquid. So when it comes in the form of ice, it's contaminated by association. So therefore, it's naturally trying to return to its original condition. That's why if you leave ice for any time, it starts to turn back into water. Because the state that it's in is unnatural. It wants to turn back into its natural condition. So, similarly, consciousness is originally pure. And consciousness is originally full of bliss and full of knowledge. But when it comes into the association of the material world, it becomes, as Krishna says, prakriti kriyamane Guna karma sarvaja. Ahankara vimudatma. So this ahankara, this false ego, is false consciousness. False consciousness. False consciousness means consciousness which is separate from Krishna. Consciousness which is separated from Krishna. So the subtlety of separated consciousness from Krishna causes the manifestation of our material body in the form of contaminated consciousness, polluted mind, false intelligence. So distinction between them, these subtle energies are very subtle, so distinctions can only be understood by their different functions. You see? So when something is very subtle, it cannot be analyzed by any of our gross senses. It can be understood by difference in function. Why do we say there's a difference between intelligence and mind? Because we observe some different function. The mind says, do this, but the intelligence says, oh no, you can't do that, you're going to be in trouble. So we can have some idea of the subtle energy by function, you see, by function, but not by anything else. So similarly, if we want to understand the subtlest energy, which is spirit soul, we have to understand it by function. You see? By function. How it's functioning. So this is very important in Sankhya philosophy because the living consciousness has a certain function. The body has another function. There's a distinct function, there's a distinct functional difference between the gross energy and the subtle energy. So therefore, we can understand by higher intelligence that the gross energy is actually being conducted under the power of the subtle energy. You see? The gross is actually working as a, if you like, servant of the subtle. We can see, just like this wood. This wood was a tree. But by our power of mind intelligence, we were able to create such a nice bookstand. So that wood is now serving us. The wood is serving us very nicely because the wood is inanimate. Now if that tree was intelligent, it would run away. You see, just like if you want to chop someone up and use them for a bit of firewood, they're going to run away. Or for the Sunday feast. Because they have intelligence. They have consciousness. But gross energy is dead. So the gross energy is dead because it is not, matter itself has no, foundation of consciousness. Consciousness is impregnated into matter by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when consciousness comes into the material world, because the function of consciousness is what? To enjoy. The function of consciousness is to enjoy. Therefore, it has to enjoy. You see, it has to enjoy. So what does it do? It tries to make arrangement for enjoyment. It tries to make arrangement for enjoyment because this is the natural function of the soul, to enjoy. The only thing is that the arrangement it's making is demonic. That's the problem. It's demonic because it is artificial. It is artificial. One time when I was in Edinburgh, Prabhupada wrote me a very nice letter. And in that letter he said, this material world is the arrangement by Krishna for the rebellious living entities to try to imitate Krishna. Prabhupada said, just like when I was a child, my sister, she wanted to imitate my mother. So my mother gave her some nice cooking things. And she gave her a rolling pin and some flour and some water. And Prabhupada said, together we happily engaged in making chapatis and cooking prasadam. But we were very young, so Prabhupada said, our cooking was nonsense. Our cooking was nonsense. But our mother, she tolerated. Because out of love, she wanted to fulfill the desire of the little child. So out of love, she arranged. But because the child was inadequate to imitate the mother, the child had not developed. The child is only tiny. If you give a child a hot cooker, it can burn itself. It can cause havoc. So therefore you make toys, these playthings, these toy things are the arrangement of the mother so as that the child. So Prabhupada said we were engaged in this nonsense activity, but we were thinking it was real. We were thinking it was real because on account of this selfish desire to enjoy like the mother. Mother is enjoying cooking, we should enjoy cooking. Mother is enjoying with her baby, we should have baby. Therefore we have doll. So you see the little girl walking around with a doll, she's got a pram, she's got little cooking things. She's trying to imitate. This imitating tendency is there in every living entity. So consciousness is manifested through these gross energies. Of course, even the intelligence, mind, and ego, they're all also dead material energy. They're not living energy. They're living because of they're subtler. They're more subtly associated with consciousness. Consciousness has a much greater relationship with mind, intelligence, and ego than it does with the body. That's why at night, when you're sleeping, your consciousness is working. So your mind is working, so you're still going on mountain climbing, and you're finding a very beautiful girl and lots of money and getting excited about this thing and that thing, or you're in distress. But when you wake up, you realize that these things were all just the mental activities. So what do we do about it? Nothing. You don't do anything about your dreams, because they're simply the material energy working, but it has nothing to do with you. But on account of the interaction between the material elements, the senses and the sense objects centered around the mind, therefore we are much more interested in the gross manifestation. So therefore it is said that the gross energy is the parent of the mind. It's the parent of knowledge. Gross energy is the parent, because just like when you're a child, you take shelter of your parents, you become conditioned by it. You understand? So when you are manifested in the material world in the form of a material body, you take shelter of the material energy, the gross energy. So therefore the gross energy actually molds, conditions, as Krishna says, that the living entities, they are my part and parcels, but due to conditional life. So this conditional life, they are struggling very hard in the material world, indriya, trying to enjoy the senses. So these 6 senses, which include the mind. So the living entity is trying to enjoy through the medium of the mind. The mind is the, the conductor of material affairs. The mind is the conductor. The mind conducts our material affairs. So the soul, in a sense, has given up proprietorship over its body and has given all authority to the mind. Therefore the mind in all the spiritual systems is the main focus that one has to deal with, because the mind is the connection with the material world. So the mind's servants is the senses. The senses are serving the mind. Just like, what is it that Krishna says? By contemplation of the senses, one develops attachment. So this attachment is there. As long as there is attachment, then from attachment, Krishna says this lust develops. From lust comes desire. This desire, lusty affair. So therefore we find, this is scientific, that if we don't contemplate, we don't get any lust. Isn't it? If we're not contemplating, then we can control the mind. Therefore all of the spiritual paths are to bring the mind under control. Mostly by abnegation. The general system is by renunciation of sense objects, one can control the mind. Renunciation. But renunciation itself is not sufficient to control the mind, because the mind is the mirror of the heart. The mind is the actual nucleus of this personality. It is intrinsically linked with the heart. So the heart requires satisfaction. The heart is hankering after love. Without love, the heart can never be satisfied. Never be satisfied. So therefore, simply abnegation will not do, because it's not sufficient to bring ananda. Ananda. So therefore, generally, renunciation is dry. People who are renounced, they're very dry. You find these yogis in the immolation, they're very dry. There's no juice there, because they're like a sort of shriveled up walnut or something. You see? just dry abnegation, dry renunciation. That's why